We got a quorum. Okay. House Elections Committee will now come to order, and clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Laubenberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Israel,
Here.
Representative Anderson,
Here.
Representative Fallon,
Here.
Representative Larson, Representative
Larson.
Reynolds,
Present.
Representative Swanson.
Here.
Okay, quorum is present, and I want to welcome everyone being here, and welcome back, and congratulations,
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Congratulations to you.
So we'll have fun. And so basically today is just going to be for our new members, and new members not only to the legislature but to the committee. We have two, Rep. Swanson and a newcomer, and Rep. Anderson, who's new to the committee. Today is just going to be organizational, informational, to kind of give an overview. That was always helpful to me, coming onto a new committee, to know what exactly our purview is, what exactly do we do or not do. So we have some of the agencies here that we interact with, and so that's what we're going to be hearing today. Y'all certainly feel free to ask any questions that you have. And with that, I'll start with Secretary of State. And Mr. Ingram, you want to come up? Introduce yourself, give all the information that we need.
Sure. I don't know if I can give you all the information.
Well,
I will give it
a
my
lot
best
of it.
shot.
Well, all your signing in information. How about
Sure.
starting with that?
Absolutely. My name is Keith Ingram. I'm the Director of the Elections Division at the Texas Secretary of State's office. And the Secretary of State of Texas is the Chief Election Officer of the state of Texas, and he is charged with obtaining and maintaining uniformity in the interpretation, application, and operation of the election code and election laws outside of the election code. We do that primarily, the division that I'm in charge of does that by assisting and advising election officials across the state, primarily county officials, but we also work with city secretaries, school superintendents, the secretaries of water districts and MUDs, and anybody else holding an election across the state of Texas. We issue advisories, we make rules, we do all the things that an agency does in an assist and advise capacity. We do not have any enforcement power, we do not have any investigative power, and so what we do through education and persuasion. Thankfully, in my experience in 5 years in this office, the county election officials want to do well. They want to get this right. They understand the importance of elections, and so they want to do it the way that we suggest that they do. And so that's our best weapon in the fight for election integrity. My office has 4 sections. We've got an administrative section that does the phones, the mail, the website, seminar preparation, and that's our biggest section as far as numbers. We have a legal section. We've got 6 lawyers that answer legal questions from county officials as well as members of the public. They are also the ones who are involved in drafting the rules and drafting the forms. We have an electronic funds management section. Our office passes out grant money for Chapter 19, so the counties get money associated with voter registration, and that's a reimbursement program. So if they spend money on a computer or electronic poll book or something related to voter registration, they ask our office for reimbursement. If it meets the qualifications, they will get their money back. We also deal with the primary election fund. The state of Texas and filing fees fund primary elections in Texas, and so we work with party chairs in the counties to assist them with their funding for the primary. So as I said, I've been in this office for 5 years. This was my second presidential election. My first year in the job was the 2012 election, and it was a fairly intense experience. I don't know if y'all remember, but the primary moved that year because of redistricting till the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and then we had the runoff in July. And so I didn't have anything to compare that to. That's the way it was my first year in this job. So this was my first normal presidential year, but it was even more intense. The pressure from the outside on the process itself was intense, and it was that way nationwide. I just got back from a state election directors meeting in Washington, D.C., and it was a common theme by all the election directors that the process itself was under scrutiny as they hadn't seen before. Obviously, our office is here as a resource for any election-related question that you have. One thing on the numbers from the November election, we had 15.1 million registered voters going into that election. That was a new record by at least 1.5 million.
How many eligible voters would you say?
So we know the voting age population is about 20 million. There is an estimate of the eligible voting age population that's about 17.5 million. That's an estimate at electproject.org for last November. I don't know his methodology, but so we've got 15.1 million voters, and then in the election we had 8.962 million actual vote, and that was almost 1 million more than the previous record, which was set in 2008. The election was smooth. The election itself was smooth, secure. There weren't any problems with it. It was all the buildup going into the election, and then the first few days of early voting, there was a social media kerfuffle over vote switching on HART voting equipment, and so that added to the tenseness. But the election itself was smooth. We did have an issue in Denton County, and our office has been working with the election administrator in Denton County to identify the issues and what went wrong so that we can make some recommendations for the future to prevent it from happening again. We expect to send that letter to Judge Horn soon. So the legal environment for elections is complex. The answer whenever you ask a question about election law is very often it depends. The election law is very complicated. If you just look at our early voting scheme in Texas, it depends. The hours of early voting depends upon what the county adopts, the size of the county, what election it is, and so the answer depends. And so often if you are asking us a question, we're going to ask you to give us more factual details before we can answer it. We have a federal legal environment that we operate in here in Texas that has the supremacy over Texas law. They've got the qualifying clause, the qualifications clause in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution that says that the state gets to set the qualifications for voters in the state. But then we have the elections clause in Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution that says that Congress can override the state's choice with regard to qualifications when it desires to do so. We have the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prevents discrimination in voting. Sections 5 and Sections 2 are primarily involved with racial discrimination. And Section 5, as you know, was overruled by the Supreme Court in June of 2013, but Section 2 remains on the books. And the difference between those is Section 5 meant that states who were subject to the preclearance requirement had to go to the Department of Justice before enforcing any law, tell them what the law was and what its effect was going to be, and get it pre-cleared. And the burden was on the states who were subject to preclearance to show that it would have no discriminatory effect. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act still has the same requirements, but now then the burden is on someone from the outside to say that the law does have a discriminatory effect, and so the burden of proof has shifted. There are also in the Voting Rights Act language requirements, so if you meet the thresholds for language minority requirements, then you have to provide election materials in that other language. We just had the census come out about a month ago, and it required Tarrant County provide election materials in Vietnamese for the first time. So now then we have Tarrant County with Vietnamese, Spanish, and English. The whole state is Spanish and English. In Harris County, you've got to do Vietnamese, Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, and English. In El Paso County, they have Pueblo, particularly the Tigua Indians, and so they have a language requirement for that. And then in Maverick County, they've got the Kickapoo Indians that they have a language requirement for. In addition, in the Voting Rights Act, there are disability accessibility requirements, primarily that a voter is entitled to the assistant of their choice. And the limitation on that is it can't be their employer or an agent of their employer, and it can't be an officer of their union. So it can't be your boss or your labor union, but other than that, it can be anybody if a voter needs assistance. Voters who need assistance are those who have a physical disability that inhibits their ability to mark the ballot themselves, or they have an inability to read or write the language that the ballot is offered in. In addition to the Voting Rights Act, we've got the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. That's also known as the Motor Voter Law, and its primary job was to require health and human service agencies in the states, as well as the Department of Public Safety in our state that issues driver's license, to also register voters. And so we've implemented the programs that are required under that, and so that's the main thing. But it also required that voters be able to register to vote by mailing in a registration card, and it specified that an attestation of citizenship on that card was required, and that they also had to attest that they met the other requirements. There are cases, recent cases, just before the 2016 election. There was Kobach versus I can't even think of it. Anyways, it was the 10th Circuit case, and it involved Kansas citizenship requirements, and the court on a preliminary injunction said that Kansas could not enforce its requirement for documented proof of citizenship because the NVRA preempts the state requirement. That, like I said, is on a preliminary injunction, so it went back to the district court, and it's pending there on the merits. We'll see what happens. There was another case, Newby versus League of Women Voters, in the D.C. Circuit, where the EAC executive director approved.
EAC, what is the EAC?
The EAC is the Election Assistance Commission that was created by the Help America Vote Act of 2002.
That's a federal thing?
It's a federal thing,
okay.
and with it went the requirements to maintain the federal voter registration form, including the state-specific instructions. So if a state has an idiosyncrasy like Texas has one, in Texas you can register to vote if you're 17 years, 10 months old. And so that's one of the state-specific instructions for Texas.
Because you'll be 18 by the next election.
Right.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that Texas has that other states don't have, and there's all those sort of idiosyncrasies that are in the state-specific instructions approved by the Election Assistance Commission. Several states, Kansas, Georgia, Alabama, and Arizona, requested the EAC approve a state-specific instruction to provide documented proof of citizenship. And the EAC director, Brian Newby, approved that request. That he was then sued on an injunction, and the D.C. Circuit upheld that injunction. And they said basically the same thing that the 10th Circuit said, that the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America Vote Act preempt state law in this area under the
Okay, can you slow down a little bit? So you're basically saying the feds do not allow us to verify citizenship? That's
what the two cases that we have so far. Again, both of those are on preliminary injunction. They are not on the substance. There hasn't been, and so the difference is that on the merits of a case, you would have proof. And so the courts have said that states on a showing that significant numbers of persons have registered under the attestation clause illegally, that maybe they could prevail, but that evidence hasn't come into the record yet. So this is all preliminary. The Help America Vote Act of 2002 required that states have an accessible voting machine in every precinct in a federal election, and so they also provided millions of dollars, billions of dollars nationwide, almost $200 million in Texas, for us to purchase that equipment with. So our office had grants to the counties for them to purchase disabled accessible voting equipment, and all of the counties were compliant with the Help America Vote Act by 2006 and 2007 when they were required to be.
Okay, and that's only for the disabled voting equipment.
That's right.
Not the regular voting machines. The
That's
counties have to pay for that themselves.
Well, the disabled voting equipment is something that the grants paid for, and it turns out to be the same thing, right? So
okay.
the equipment is the same, but one of them can be configured for a disabled machine, or two of them, but they're all the same equipment.
Okay, because
so
I thought the counties were saying that they were on their own.
They are, because the one-time federal money that came with HAVA has been spent. So now then, as that equipment ages and needs to be replaced, the counties are the ones that are going to be responsible.
Okay, so there's no more federal money.
That's right.
I gotcha.
And the requirement for the disabled accessible equipment remains. So the federal requirement remains, but the money to pay for it has been exhausted. And so that's something that the counties are in the middle of dealing with. Some of the equipment was purchased in 98, 97, 99, and it is becoming necessary to replace it. So that's what's happening even as we stand here today. And in an election world, you don't want to make big changes in an even-numbered year. So we've got 2017 where some counties are making a change, and then we've got 2019 where some more are, and 2021. So that's kind of the cycle we're in. The other requirement from the Help America Vote Act was that state have an electronic voter registration database. We have the TEAM system, which has recently been redone, and it complies with the federal requirements. But again, we got money from the federal government to pay for it and to maintain it, but that money is going to run out after this biennium. And that is all that I have prepared. Do y'all have any
Okay.
questions?
That's good. And this last election went pretty well.
It went very well indeed.
Yeah, enough folks. Did you get a lot of phone calls?
We had thousands and thousands
Okay.
of phone calls, yes.
With your 8 lawyers?
With our 6 lawyers
6
and our
lawyers,
receptionists,
yeah.
you know, a lot of the questions are the same, so our receptionists
Okay.
have talking points that they can answer questions with,
Okay.
but only if it's more complex does it go to the lawyers, but we had thousands of questions.
Vice Chair, hold on, I think the Vice Chair had a question first.
Yeah, Keith, I was going to ask you about the age of the voting equipment is something that I know a lot of folks are concerned about. Has your office done an assessment, like a one-pager to say, here's the last time someone made a major expenditure? Is that something we obtain from you, or is it?
We have that information
You do?
because the election code requires that anyone purchasing election equipment have the contract approved by our office. And so we've had several counties purchase recently certified equipment, and so we've got that information.
So is it a snapshot document to say, here's where we stand right now in Texas with the age of our equipment?
We could conceivably do that. What we've got is we've got a web page where every county has their voting system on there, but some of those are going to be new versions. You know, like Jefferson County had ES&S for a long time. They've just switched to HART, so their HART equipment is the old version, but it's a new machine, and so I don't know if we'd be able to parse that out very easily.
Well, I know our county is going through that process of looking at making a major upgrade. And I mentioned that if your office has it easily accessible, I think it'd be an important topic for us to discuss.
Certainly.
Rep Reynolds?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Keith, I know we had the court decision, and then we had to roll out the new information on the voter ID last year right before the elections. I was just wondering, was that process pretty smooth? Did you have a lot of complaints or, uncertainty regarding the rollout?
So the timing of the rollout was unfortunate because the court's interim remedy came out on August the 10th,
Right.
which was after our county election official seminar. So our best opportunity to educate counties so that they can then educate their poll workers is that election seminar. We obviously sent out emails and did all of the work that we could do. There was inevitably some confusion. Some of the confusion came from voters because they misunderstood the court's ruling, and so there was misunderstanding on this side, thinking that ID wasn't required, and then the poll workers didn't fully understand the process, and so there was some of that natural friction. But like I said, overall the election went very well, and the number of persons who needed to use the alternate procedure was pretty small.
The impediment to
the reasonable impediment declaration.
Yeah, reasonable impediment. How many voters would you say out of the close to 9 million?
The Austin American Statesman has reported it as 16,400, and that's pretty close. So it was 0.18%. It was less than 0.2% of voters.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Reynolds, if I could add, if we continue to have this process with more time for education and training and more repeat elections, I expect both the voters and the poll workers to get better at it.
Thank you.
Rep Swanson?
Hi, thank you. What was the final determination on the accusation of that the machines would change the vote? Was that ever proven, or is it just alleged?
It was a very strange thing because the vote switching, we get every election, but usually it's ES&S equipment. I don't know, ES&S equipment, do you vote in Harris County? Mm-hmm. So you use HART. Anybody vote on a touchscreen? Okay,
Yes.
So what county are you in?
Dallas
County. So you all vote
In
on the
Collins.
electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And so usually it's like an old Palm Pilot. Whenever you would click where you wanted to click, it would click the selection underneath it. And so you had to recalibrate your screen and chase that dot all over the screen with your stylus. And that's been the situation. We've had ES&S equipment that gets out of calibration, that you have to recalibrate the screens, and everything's fine. This time, it was Hart equipment. It was Hart intercivic counties that were having the issue. And we couldn't figure out what in the world, because they don't have touch screens. They have a click wheel. So how in the world can you get out of calibration? And John Oldham down in Fort Bend County started messing with it, trying to figure out what was going on, since it was Montgomery and Tarrant and Potter. So it was all Hart Hart intercivic equipment. And John figured out that if you are waiting for the ballot to load, you hit next, and it takes a second or so to come on the screen. And if you get impatient and you hit that again, it's going to deselect your vote. So it was a combination of long ballots that take a minute to load from that first screen when you do straight party. So it was only the straight party people that were having this problem. So if you pick straight party Democrat and you get in a hurry before the next screen, then it would deselect your choice, and all of a sudden it would show Donald Trump as your choice, and you would be upset about that. Or if you picked straight party Republican and you did the same thing, then it would deselect and it would show Hillary as your choice. And so it
defaulted to the other party.
Because because anytime that's the way.
You didn't punch the other party. I mean, you punched your party, you got impatient, you punched it again, that actually undid it. And then by default, it just went to the opposite party, assuming, instead of waiting for you to punch again.
So whenever you hit that button again while the screen was blank, you were actually deselecting your choice and selecting the other. And so it was a combination of long ballots that take a second to load and people who vote every 4 years and not unfamiliarity with the equipment.
So when you say they were pushing that button again, they were hitting the next button, or what button were they pushing?
I'm not sure which, because I don't vote on that equipment. There was a fella in Montgomery County who called me very upset because this happened to his son, and he hadn't voted yet. And I said, here's what we think is happening. See if you can replicate it when you go vote, and call me back. So he called me back Friday evening, and he said, you were right. I could make it deselect my choice by hitting it while the screen was still blank. And so I don't know exactly what they hit. I don't know.
But
if
it only changed the presidential race, no other race?
Because that's on the next screen.
Oh, okay. It would be the top one that would come up.
But it would only happen when they hit straight party.
Right, and it was only the straight party voters that had the problem.
Because when you hit straight party, then it brings up everybody on the ballot that is under that party for you to look at.
Right. What it'll do is you still have to page through the ballot, but all of the choices will already be the party you selected until you get to a nonpartisan race toward the bottom of the ballot. But because the next race was president, that's the one they were messing with.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay, so any other questions, members? Okay, on the equipment, on the subject of the equipment, as you said, a lot of counties, a lot of the equipment is going to be replaced. Now, the counties are looking at equipment now. We may be doing something here to allow more options. Have you let the counties know that? Because if they purchase equipment now and there's something better out there, then it's
right
a little late.
So several counties have made a move. I don't know for sure how many. We certified several voting systems last year,
Right.
And so several counties have purchased some of that equipment. I think it's about 10, maybe 15.
How many choices do they have now?
So they still have the basic same three choices. They've got Premier, Diebold TSX systems. They've got the Hart systems, and they've got ES&S systems. Those are the only three vendors in the state.
Okay.
But Hart and ES&S have had new systems, both paper-based and DREs, come through for certification in the last year. So there's more
Right.
choices within those three vendors. And the counties who have been purchasing equipment, the contracts that we've been seeing are for the new Hart DRE equipment. Lubbock has made a move, Medina, Young, Hidalgo. So some big counties have spent several $1 million on a new DRE. And so, I don't know, that equipment is legal in Texas right now.
Yeah. No, I was just saying if other options become available, then it's a little...
Right.
Okay. Rep. Swanson.
Yes, thank you. What does DRE stand for, and how is that machine different than, say, what we're using in Harris County currently?
So Harris County does use DRE equipment. The HART system that y'all use is a direct recording electronic device, and what it is it's a system that records the vote electronically, and only after the fact, if required for a manual recount, do you print out the paper records. And so it doesn't print anything on paper contemporaneously with the vote. It stores the vote in 3 places. It stores it on the central computer that ties the machines in the polling place together. It puts it on a flash drive on each individual machine, and it puts it on the hard drive of each individual machine. And so on election night, they collect those central computers that control the whole 5 or 6 machines in the polling place and count those. But if there's ever any doubt or concern, you can always pull the flash drives out of each individual DRE and look at those and see if they match what's on the central accumulator for each polling place.
Okay, any other questions, members? Thanks, Keith.
All right, thank you.
All right. Chair, I'm going to call up another agency that we have just, a tiny little bit of interaction with on this committee is the Ethics, and Shauna Willing and Ian Stisloff. Y'all want to come up? And y'all filled out the witness?
We did.
Okay, great. If you want to introduce yourself, who you represent.
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Shauna Willing. I am the Executive Director of the Texas Ethics Commission. I brought with me Ian Stusloff, who's our General Counsel. He's been there a lot longer than I have. I've been there 2 weeks. So I am
Be
learning.
nice, everyone.
I know. This is called on-the-job training. But in any case, as the chair mentioned, there's a little bit of work that you all do that involves our agency. We are the state agency that administers and enforces all of the campaign finance disclosure reporting requirements in Texas under the Texas Election Code, lobby registration, lobby reports, some items under the government code, including personal financial statements that are required to be filed by office holders and candidates and state officials. There are provisions under the government code that relate to the speaker elections. There's some local government code provisions for certain candidates and office holders who, on the county level, opt to file with the Ethics Commission. Most local candidates and office holders file locally, but some county judges can, and
Okay,
statutory
can you kind
judges.
of explain that a little bit more? It's an option. It's
Correct.
not a law. It's just if the county commissioners court chooses to use the Ethics Commission, then they make that decision locally.
Right. So it's the county judges and the statutory county judges, I think, specifically, and Ian can correct me if there's anything else related to that. There are also provisions, if you recall last session, House Bill 1295 was passed that has to do with conflicts of interest in contracting. So government entities and business entities that are going to contract have to file a disclosure of persons with interests, and those we had to come up with rules and forms related to that. Answer a lot of phone calls, and we accept filings from both the government entities and the businesses that are contracting with those entities. We also issue written advisory opinions with regard to any of the laws that relate to the agency, and we also can pass rules to clarify any of the rules relating to what the agency enforces. Some of the advisory opinions also can relate to chapters 36 and 39 of the Penal Code relating to gifts and bribery. We don't enforce those. Obviously, if we had an issue that came up relating to a violation, we would refer that to law enforcement. But we do have some advisory opinions that provide some guidance on those particular areas of law, particularly gifts and bribery. don't know what else I can talk to you about. I probably should answer questions, but if you have
Sure.
tough questions, I'm going to have Ian answer them.
You got Ian there. Got it. Any questions, members? Rep. Anderson.
When someone is filling out their application to run for state office, if they make a material misrepresentation on that, is that an ethics issue or is that a legal issue?
You want to maybe take some of these? Sure. I haven't been here long enough to know that.
All right, Chair, do I have to call him up? Okay, Chair calls up Ian Stuslaw.
Stuslav, yes.
Stuslav.
I'm Ian Stuslav, General Counsel. And so on an application for to run for office, that is not under the Ethics Commission. So actually filing a ballot application is more in the purview of the Secretary of State or maybe the county local officials, but it's not under the Texas Ethics Commission.
Okay, that answers that question. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? All right, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, we have one more agency that we really don't have any authority over. We just work with them, obviously, because it deals with elections. But we call up Department of Public Safety, Skylar Hearn and Sherry Gibson. You want to come up together or one hang back?
Yes.
That's up to you. Okay.
Good afternoon,
Skylar, go ahead.
Madam Chair, members. My name is Skylar Hearn. I'm an Assistant Director with the Texas Department of Public Safety and the incoming Chief of the Driver's License Division. So also learning my way through this new division. The relation to elections, the department or the Driver's License Division conducts about 6 million transactions, licensing transactions per year. And through those transactions, we facilitate, either directly or indirectly, the SOS's mission for registering voters. And that's done through our licensing, either typically at the facility through originals or renewals.
6 million new and renewal.
And modifications and
Yeah, and
total transactions are 6 million.
just ID cards. And
Yes, ID cards and driver's license.
6 million.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So,
that's a lot.
we were just a facilitator to the Secretary of State's office for that purpose. So other than that, for here, we'll take questions if you have.
Any questions? Vice Chair.
Mr. Hearn, can you describe the motor voter law as it exists in Texas? How does it work right now?
You want to describe that, Sherry? I'm gonna let Sherry
Okay, and
go
Sherry,
through the
when you come
details.
up, introduce yourself.
Sherry Gibson, Deputy Assistant Director with Headquarters
Can
Operations.
you talk a little bit more in the mic?
Sure. Sherry Gibson, Deputy Assistant Director with Headquarters Operations. So the Motor Voter Act, the way that the department has implemented that with the
And when was
Secretary of
that
State.
passed? I'm sorry to interrupt. When was that passed?
Initially in 1993.
93. Okay,
Mhm.
got it.
And so the way that the department does it is when an individual comes into the driver license office and applies either for a duplicate or a renewal or original license, they're given the opportunity, if they're a citizen and meet the age requirements, to submit an application for registration. Excuse me. And those are collected electronically with an electronic signature and transmitted to the Secretary of State on a daily basis. So that's for an in-office transaction. If someone is sending in information through a mail renewal packet, when we send out that invitation to that individual, we send out an approved voter registration application form that they then complete and mail back to the Secretary of State.
And Sherry, explain to us when someone gets a mail renewal form, that's because they're in good standing, right?
Right, they're in good standing and they're allowed to do it if they're a non-commercial driver or identification card holder. They're allowed to do it every other renewal cycle. So once every 12 years, they're required to come into the office. If they meet all the criteria every other time, every 6 years, then they're allowed to either do it through the mail or online.
So if I have a good photo, I can keep it for 12 years.
If you have a good photo, you can
If
keep
I
it
have
for
a
12
bad
years.
photo, I gotta keep that for 12 years.
It's very important.
If you choose to.
Yes.
Very important.
Yeah. If you go into the
Okay.
driver license office, regardless of if you're eligible for online, you will be required to take a new photo.
Gotcha. But there is no way to verify citizenship. If they check the box, I'm a citizen, you can't verify it. You just have to go on the good faith, right?
So for a renewal application,
It's a
that is
renewal.
correct. If they mark the citizenship yes, and they are already in our system as a citizen yes, then by their signature. For original applications beginning in 2008, we began lawful presence verification to issue a driver license or ID. So anyone who originally applied after 2008 is either presenting some type of document showing that they're a citizen or providing us the documentation showing they're here lawfully.
So Sherry, tell me about the renewals by mail. How do I renew my voter registration if you sent me something in the mail?
Okay, so if we send you a mail-in renewal application, there's two forms. There's one that you send back to the department that actually processes your renewal of your driver license or your identification card, and then there's an application form for voter registration. If you complete that, then you submit that. It goes straight to the Secretary of State. It's a paper form.
So there's nothing electronic about it.
There's nothing electronic about that, the mail.
The news that we saw recently about folks who were going to renew their license but thought they had been registered to vote and were not registered to vote, and how many people were surprised about that. What's your role in that? Tell me what your take is on that.
So our role in that is in the initial election, 2012 was one of the first major elections we had where we had started the electronic registration. And so during that election process, it was a very cumbersome process for the county registrars to reach out to us. They sent it either by fax or by email. So the Secretary of State developed a web portal that the counties use. So if somebody comes in and they state that they applied for voter registration application through the department, the county is able to enter that information into this portal, and then the department goes in and they look at their last application and respond back through that portal, either whether that individual had said yes on their previous application, whether they had said no, whether they had done an online transaction, or whether or not we were able to identify the record. Because there's about a little over 1,000 this last election cycle that we were unable, with the information that they provided us, to identify our record.
So how is it that so many people didn't get registered? What do you attribute it to?
It's a combination of things. Some of it, for those that applied in office, sometimes it was a clerical error. Sometimes there were situations where our system did say yes, that it had been sent. So we don't know if if through the electronic process it got missent. There's a possibility that it could have had the wrong county entered, so that when the one county went to pick it up, it wasn't their registration. There's a lot of different things that could contribute to that. Secretary of State may have more information on that, because really what we do is we provide what they said on their application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, members?
Yes,
Yeah, Rep. Anderson.
So here's, along the same lines as Vice Chair Israel. Somebody comes in to vote. They say that they registered. The priest or the judge cannot find where they're registered, so they have them cast a provisional ballot. Those provisional ballots are then processed by the elections department, and they send a request to DPS that says, my question is, what does that request say? Does it say that they did check the box? Because there are many cases, from what I understand, where they check the box, but the information may have been incomplete. When they were registering, they may have been legal residents, but not citizens. Tell me how the data goes back from DPS to the ballot board judges who are having to make that decision. Is this a good ballot to be counted, or is it from someone who is not registered to vote?
So again, really what we do is we look, and the response that we provide them is based off the paperwork that the applicant signed when they were in the office, or if the last transaction was an online transaction, there wouldn't be any paperwork. So all we can do is tell that election judge what they had said in their last transaction. So if they indicated on their paperwork that it was no, then that's what our response to them is. As far as the rules and what else they do to make a determination whether they count that ballot or not, I don't really, I mean, I don't have control over
That's
that.
outside your
That's outside of
purview
our realm.
because you send back, basically you send back, yes, they checked the box.
Right,
No, they didn't check the box.
Correct.
Correct?
correct.
So who do you feel we should direct that question to?
We can bring up the Secretary of State.
That would be
Okay.
Secretary of
That-
State.
That's, I'm tying it all together.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And you want to bring up Secretary of State again? You want to ask about that, Rodney?
You want
Do
Secretary?
you want to follow up on that? You wanna-
we can do that here. We can do it all. It doesn't matter. If you
It's up to you.
Yeah, if you want to.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ingram, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
Keith
you
Ingram,
can say
Secretary of
all
State's
over
office.
What happens what is a ballot judge supposed to do when they get that? It says, yes, we tried to register, but there's still no record that they are actually registered with the Secretary of State.
So what's supposed to happen is this is supposed to be at the voter registrar stage of the process. The voter registrar looks up the registrations and deals with them before it goes to the early voting ballot board for a decision. And so these provisional ballots come back from the election. They go to the voter registrar's office. There's an indication on there that this person says they registered at DPS at the approximate date. So that all goes into the web portal. The DPS sends back information, yes, they tried to register to vote. Here's their application. And the VR, the voter registrar, is supposed to send them through the registration process at that point.
So
And-
if we're now well after when people are supposed to have been registered to vote.
Right.
So if it's after, I guess my question is, are those votes supposed to be counted or not? I don't know the answer to that.
So the whole goal of this process is if somebody went to the DPS back in July before the election and they asked to be registered to vote, to see if there's a way to save that vote. And so they did what they were supposed to do. They said yes, and for some reason, whatever reason it is, CSR didn't send it through. It got directed to the wrong county and didn't come back to us. Whatever reason, it didn't end up resulting in a registration. And so the goal is to make sure that the voter registrar gets that information, gets the opportunity to register that voter as of July when they were there. If there's some other problem with the registration, if it's incomplete, then that provisional ballot is not supposed to, it's
Okay.
supposed to be sent to the ballot board with a recommendation that it not be counted.
So
Okay.
basically what you're saying, sorry, Ronnie, is they show up on election day, they're not on the registration rolls, they said, hey, I filled this out July 1st. They allow them to vote provisionally. And then when they check it and y'all find out that, yeah, they did do something in July, then that provisional ballot would be counted. Is that-
Provided there's nothing else wrong with the registration
Right,
application.
right.
Thank
Do
you.
y'all keep track of the provisional ballots at the state level, or is that all done locally?
Only in the very general sense that we
Major elections?
we note how many there were. And we get that on the canvas report, and we also
Okay.
get it election night. So
How many were there in this last election?
in the last election, I think there was just over 50,000.
Out of almost 9 million?
Right. Yeah, it was about 52,000 provisional ballots.
Okay.
And about 20,000 of those were sent to the web portal.
Okay, Rep. Swanson?
I have a couple of questions. Okay, is there a requirement for somebody to, based on what you said earlier, it sounded like there is a requirement if someone's going to get assistance, they have to have some sort of disability. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's up to the voter. So it's up to the voter to determine whether they're eligible for assistance, and the poll workers can't do anything to question that.
Okay. Then my next question is, we've heard of what they're calling voter ambush, that somebody is standing outside the polls, walks up to people, and maybe they are the employer of that person's spouse or something, and they're like, you do want help from me, right? if you want your husband to keep his job or something, and so they're going in and helping multiple people, so that there's pressure then to, these people are ambushed, they're pressured to then vote a certain way. What would you say as far as, what can you tell us about that?
So there's nothing in the Voting Rights Act, Chapter 208 of the Voting Rights Act, about how a voter and an assistant come together. So that's a clean slate for the state to ride on. You know what I mean? What the federal government has said is that a voter is entitled to the assistant of their choice, other than their labor union or their employer. But there's not anything in federal law about how that meeting occurs or how that choice is made. I know that there is a bill that I've seen from Representative Schofield that would deal with that there's not any active solicitation of strangers to offer assistance in voting. Unfortunately, Section 1 of that bill requires that an assistant be a registered voter, and that would probably run afoul of the Voting Rights Act, but Section 2 I don't think does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, members? Okay, thank you. Okay, that pretty much covers it. Oh, Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, thank you for just a minute. I wanted to welcome, we have a visitor here from Harris County, newly elected Tax Assessor Collector Ann Bennett, who I think will be visiting us from time to time. Ms. Bennett, if you would just wave, I think everybody would, so welcome from Harris County, Ms. Bennett.
She looks very official.
She does. She's looking sharp for Harris County.
Okay, welcome. All right. Any other comments, members? Okay, thank y'all for being here. So we are ready to go. And if there is no further business before us, the House Committee on Elections now stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair. Thank y'all for coming.